we didn't really actually do introductions at the beginning because we kind of just dived into this. So I will, we can insert this to the beginning. My name is David Lublin. I am one of the developers at VIDVOX. We are joined by Cornelius, who does a bunch of our sales and support and other helpful things here at VIDVOX. Sarah, you want to do a quick intro on who you are?
Yeah, I'm Sarah Groff Hennigh-Palermo. I do video live code and video art and also write regular software sometimes for money, but that's not very important.
And Anton, aka Vade, co-creator of
Uh,
Siphon, which we didn't really even get into. But we'll save that for next time. We'll get you and Tom to talk about the history of Siphon another
oh
time.
yeah. Yeah,
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 yeah.
that'd be great.
But why don't you give us, 30 seconds of who you are?
Yeah, so hey, I'm Anton. I work with software both for work and for play, and I build video tools for myself to perform with, and share those tools with other folks. I'm interested in um, all anything that's on the screen that's interactive. I'm probably interested in it in some way. And yeah, I think that's it. That basically is the 10,000 foot view. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
perfect.
I was gonna say one of the hardest things still for software is apparently calendars and dates. It's not easy. So, you know.
Yeah, so yeah,
Yeah.
actually, over because of this, Sarah and I were talking about how it must be, it's never really addressed in like Star Trek or Star Wars, the idea that like you're on Earth with a 24-hour, daily clock, and I live on Bajor. They got a 26-hour, day. Scheduling those calls must be a nightmare. Like when your days don't even line up and you're in completely different time zones that are local to your own planet. What are the JavaScript libraries like for that?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
How have they figured that
And then
out?
also, do you have to convert for how fast you're going in warp? Like, is there, I guess warp is faster than light, so there's no time dilation. Is that, or if you're under impulse, right? So, like, what mode of transport are you? Okay, sorry.
Also think, this is again, this is
Yeah.
what people want to hear in our
Hey,
conversations.
this is
It's
what you
not
signed
about,
up for.
yeah, it's these are arts tech conversations, so we're going to go into some stuff. But
Right.
I think that when you're inside of at least for the Star Trek universe, I think when you're inside of a warp bubble that's necessary for traveling at warp speed, it is regular time with the outside world. But
But doesn't Star Trek have, I remember they talk about tachyons. So there's already this concept of faster than light communication. There has to be, right?
oh yeah,
So I think that,
sorry,
no, no, go ahead, go ahead.
they call it subspace communications is the way that they
I
refer to it.
see.
Yeah.
Okay. So how do they reconcile that with the idea that, fuck, you know what? Let's kill this. We got to
Okay.
stop this mode.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's fine.
We're gonna go. I've been
My answer is
I
that data is just one large JavaScript temporal library. That's
mhm.
actually what he's doing the whole time, is just scheduling, looking things up.
That's amazing. He's right, exactly. He's just that's why he has need for his emotional coprocessor just to deal with the stress of all the time. Yeah.
Well, plus there's like those 3 months that don't exist, right? In like the 15th century or something, when they like jumped ahead in July to switch from the to the Gregorian calendar, and they were just like October doesn't exist anymore for this year.
Right.
I don't know about this. What enlighten me. What is this thing that happened?
Well, so this is part of the reason I believe that Orthodox and like Catholic and like Protestant holidays are different days, is the
Hmm.
pre-Gregorian calendar. Oh, now I can't even think about who that was named after. But anyway, pre-Gregorian was one calendar, and then they decided to change it. I don't even remember why. This is a very bad story because I don't remember all the details. I just know that they jumped ahead like 2 months. And so even if you're converting time in like JavaScript libraries, if you go back far enough, it has to like account for those days not existing. Especially if you're translating to other calendars, right? Like if you're like
Right.
July 5th, 1300, what is that on the Hebrew calendar?
So does that mean then that October isn't a fall month when it was in the uh pre this switch, this sort of a
Well, so I don't think it's the same switch, but you'll notice that October, Oct is 8, but it is the 10th
yes,
month.
I
December
do
is the
notice
12th
that.
month.
Yeah. Yeah,
That is
yeah.
also because they stuck in, I believe the Romans stuck in 2 months somewhere. That for a while,
Right.
winter was an undetermined period of time. So you didn't have 2 months. You were just like, it's winter, and then you started again in like March or something. This is all me
Oh,
half
interesting.
remembering things I've learned. So
No, I
please,
love this.
nobody who's watching this, take it as truth. You should look it up on Wikipedia.
I
Right.
love this errata.
I
This is good info.
what I'll say is for a future guest on these sets of interviews, we will try and find a date time expert who can really address all of these questions. So write down your questions, and then we'll just have like a whole hour just on that. For some reason, that'll be relevant to the VidVox blog. Um, yeah, it'll be great. But on to some video topics, as long as we're here, and I have two amazing video artists that we can talk to about their work and their history and their just general knowledge. Actually, I will say one of the like go-to questions I have aside from video stuff is like, what is a topic you could just talk about for like 5 to 10 minutes? And we've clearly already touched on one of those, where yes, we could just talk about date times forever. But let's start by talking about glitch, because both of you do glitch stuff aesthetically at times, or you're known for it. But also kind of different styles even within that. So I'm gonna start with Anton. Um, Particularly with our kind of user base, who people who might be watching this, you're particularly well known for like the VO2 glitch plugins, and along with that, the Rutt Etra. But we'll talk a little bit more about that because I want to talk about analog hardware. Sarah has a Fairlight and a bunch of LZX hardware.
Awesome.
So yeah,
Awesome.
and you literally got to work with Bill Etra on adapting the Rutt Etra to software. So that's a whole other topic to talk about later on. But let's talk about glitch. Uh, One of the things about glitch, and specifically that I thought were interesting about the VO2 glitch plugins, were some of them were like, I guess, purely aesthetic. You were just going for like you wanted to mimic a glitch style, but then
Hmm.
there were ones like the FBO glitch that Zach Norman
Hmm.
used with Square Pusher, which to amazing effect, which literally just took advantage of a little bug.
Hmm.
Can you just talk a little bit about how those plugins came to exist and how you ended up open sourcing them and anything else you want to talk about on glitch, digital versus analog, and
Yeah, I mean, um, I think the framing of the different styles of glitch. I'm recalling. I think at one of the first glitch festivals, there was terminology um, called glitch and glitch alike. And glitch alike was this sort of idea of processes that are very controllable, deterministic, that well, if we just start with the definition of a glitch, is probably the best place to start, which is a system that's it's not behaving the way you expect it to behave, right? And then you have questions of, you know, how do I intercede? Is it really a glitch if I ask for it? Right? You get these like certain sort of philosophical art kind of questions about like theory, like media theory about it. But then when you're just sort of going to create an aesthetic output because it's something that you think is appropriate for whatever you're doing, if it accompanies the music in a certain way or you just like it and you want to do it, now you have some choices, right? The choices are, can I design a system that's deterministic and emulates it? And from the sort of the media theory perspective, at least as I, who am not a media theorist, recalls, is that's glitch alike. You're making a system that is 100% dependable. You know exactly what it's going to do, and you're calling it glitch because it is reminiscent of what a thing that it looks like. And some hardliners would say, "Fuck you, that's not glitch. You're putting on what are you doing? You're wearing a costume and you're pretending, right?" And then there's other ways to get systems to you kind of can poke at it and you can say, "Hey, I'd like you to fall over or do something unexpected." And then you have this whole other realm of non-determinacy, right? Where you can say, I can poke at this thing. Maybe it falls over, maybe it doesn't, but I'll get something out of it. And I kind of know I'm going to get something, but I don't really know what. And I like those two. I think there's value to both of them. And so the plugins, specifically the V002 plugins, sort of do both because from my perspective is I'm looking to affect the screen. And what I care about is what you kind of take away. Does it syncopate with the music? Does it feel like something that is aesthetically interesting, aligned in the space in some way? And both can be really fun. So yeah, the glitch plugins Some of them are just program systems that emulate analog stuff, and it's just totally faking it. And then there's other ones that take advantage of errata of how the graphics cards work. And without going into it, you can just sort of poke at it and you get some memory that you're not supposed to get. And that's actually a security bug. And you can make some really cool things with it. But you can't anymore because they closed those bugs. So they don't work like that anymore. So that's like the 10,000 foot view. Hopefully that's helpful.
No, that's exactly what I was looking for. And yeah, in particular, I remember the way that Zach Norman used your FBO glitch for the Square Pusher show was before the show, because it pulled texture memory that was uninitialized basically, and there was just whatever was in that memory buffer was still there. It wasn't cleared to black. So he would like load up a whole bunch of images just in like preview and stuff like that. So it filled up the system's memory buffers, and then he would close those things. And then when he launched VDMX and started running those glitch plugins, that's what would be part of the glitch. So, I was recently thinking like, but even though that glitch is no longer works in the way you were describing, the way that it actually takes advantage of a bug, you could now fake it because you could just here's the folder of images that I was loading up.
Yeah.
But yes, now you're kind of faking it. All right. Almost the same question for Sarah now. Like, what is your approach to glitch? What is your definition? Do you have any comments to what Anton said?
Yeah, so a lot of what I think about when I think about like glitch versus glitch alike, which is something that I think comes up a lot, is for me, it's almost more what the goal of the artist using it is that's kind of important to me. So like what I would think of as like classic glitch or standard glitch is the interesting part of the work is understanding how machines work by breaking them, right? And so like the aesthetic output might not even be the most important part. Like glitch stuff looks cool and that's nice. And if you do glitch stuff with images, then you can sort of see the effect of breaking the computer. But to me, that's the focus on the machine. And then there's a lot of glitch-alike work that's about that you want the aesthetic, whether it's deterministic or not. Like there's definitely, I use a lot of signal culture emulators, right? Including like their data moshing emulator. And that's deterministic, right? Like mostly, but not entirely because my brain doesn't work like a computer. So I'm like, I kind of know what's going to happen. I'm not really super interested in being able to control it beyond vaguely understanding how it's going to work. And for me, that's interesting aesthetically because then you're like presenting people with a way to understand the material of a computer, not so much because they understand how to write the code and what's happening behind it, but because they can see it. So I think about it a lot like color field painting or abstract expressionism. That's a lot of what I'm interested in my work is sort of showing the materiality of video or digital, which is very funny because I think people think of it as very immaterial, which is wrong. Like it's still coming out of silicon or tubes or something else. And so for me, glitch is really that focus. It becomes a materialist focus. I think unlike a lot of other video artists, I like hate representational stuff. I don't want a person's face in my work. I don't want it to be something that that you know what it is. I'm like, how about you look at all of this, all of these pixels, all of this static, and then you start seeing the materialism that's there. Like I have a picture from earlier this year that I finally have like 30 people staring at like static projected on a wall. And I felt like that's like my peak life. I have achieved my dream by making people stare at static and like genuinely enjoy it.
Awesome. I really like what you said about sort of the deconstruction of the medium and that video has a materiality to it, right? And that I think that there's this assumption across the gamut in art and whatnot that video is this thing that you have to put on a screen and the only way it becomes material is how it's kind of like installed, right? And it doesn't have unto itself its own sort of life and things that you can inspect and poke at rather than like of the material form itself versus what the signal is that's being projected or conveyed.
Which is really funny because so much of what people think of as early video experimentation, any effects, right? Nam June Paik or anybody, early on, that works because of the materialism of video. Any of the early effects work because it's a wave that you can affect, whether it's with magnets or redo, right? Which I know but maybe not everybody knows. And so it's so funny because it's like, no, it works because it's a material.
Yeah, yeah. It's just an electron where and someone has some opinions about what it should do, and when you break those opinions, you get some interesting things, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah.
Even along with this, I was recently thinking about how in the, I guess, late 70s, early 80s, when cable television was first coming around, the way that they would do like pay-per-view channels and things like that is they're doing a distortion on the signal. And people would get, everyone had like their dad had a friend of a friend of a friend, maybe you could get one of those little boxes
Oh yeah.
where
Oh
you could
yeah.
like descramble your TV. And so it was like a reverse glitch in a sense, as, a product, product in
Yeah, it's
quotation.
glitches, copy protection, early days, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But I remember, after that, was no longer kind of a thing, and cable had moved more to a digital system. When my friends and I were now doing our early glitch, video shows, at some dive bar in college. One of us managed to get our hands on one of those, and now that was one of our effects. We were using the descrambler.
Oh.
We had our WJMX 50, and one of the effect, we would use one of the outputs on that as like an effect out that would go into, your descrambler, so I could do that as an extra effect on things.
So the descrambler with an unscrambled signal would give you a scrambled signal out because
Yes.
that's great. That's
Yeah.
awesome. I've
Yeah.
never heard of anyone doing that, but that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Um, yeah, that would be maybe a fun Eurorack module to make for
Yeah, for
video.
sure.
Yeah, right. That's
Uh,
awesome.
and yeah, on the so on moving along slightly on this topic, getting to what I was saying before, you both also have experience with analog, not just digital representations of this glitch stuff, but you also both have worked with analog hardware. Uh, again, I was saying, Vade, you got to work with Bill Etra on the Rutt Etra originally. I would love to hear you talk a little bit about that, and then we could have Sarah maybe talk about the Fairlight and other LZX hardware.
Yeah, I mean the genesis of working with Bill was sort of a byproduct of being kind of in the right place at the right time. So Bill was in New York and he started coming to these events that we used to have called Share. And Share was a kind of a open door policy. Anybody could come in and jam with music or video. So it was a space. It moved around a little bit, but it was every weekend. I think it was on Saturday or something, and or no, it was Sunday. Sunday Share, I think is what it was. I should
I,
remember that,
I,
by the way.
I remember Sharon. Was there one place where, for a while, there was like a kind of a waterfall that people were projecting onto?
Yeah, there was this fantastic wine bar of all places, and I should remember the name because it was, um, but I don't. It was this wine bar down on 8th Street across on St. Mark's in Manhattan, and they had this really lovely, sort of modern, very minimal hallway between the bar and then sort of a lounge space in the back. And whoever put the space together decided they would put a bunch of very small but elegantly installed LED screens. And then they also took it upon themselves to let any video get routed and have a patch panel. It was very like who did this? This person is a should be a great friend.
I mean, it
And
was the
then,
era where we also had, what was the bar where you could
oh
video?
my God, yeah.
We had a bunch of VJ events. I did
Oh,
a VJ battle there. We came down from Troy for that.
I only played one show there, and that was my first show ever, and it went so horribly bad. It was so bad. But
Uh,
anyway, I digress. I can't think of the name of that bar. That place was incredible. It was like the surveillance bar, right? Where your table had a TV in it, and you could look at other tables because they had a camera. Please find you're okay. I can tell you're Googling it. But anyway, so Bill would go to these events, and I was sort of I got my sea legs working with Max and Jitter, and then starting to build my own plugins for Quartz Composer at the time. And he was just really generous with his knowledge, and he had a vision for what a video orchestra would be and how video as an instrument could evolve from analog to um, digital systems. And we would just get into conversations, and I was hungry to learn because he had the history, he has knowledge. I'm not by any means an electronics expert. I'm not great with hardware. I don't know much about I just don't lick the capacitor. That would be bad. That's kind of like about where my knowledge starts and ends. Um, and in talking with Bill about the various roles and ways in which video could be used as an orchestra, meaning different types of instruments all contributing in the same way that sound overlaps and can be composed additively. How do you need to treat video? It's a different kind of a field in a certain sense. So we'd have conversations about this. And then, I was just like, all right, so like, what's this Red Etra thing? And then I found out through Bill and through Benton Bainbridge, who would also occasionally show up to the share meetings, the share hangouts, that there was a physical Red Etra that was being restored, or a few of them being restored. And I got to get a demo there and see firsthand the stark difference between the reality of the instrument and the reality and what is captured in historical documents of what the instrument looks like. So it's much more high fidelity. It's much more high frequency than with the video. It's just really this like very high
I will
fidelity.
I will just say, yeah, no, the for people who don't know, we'll find some pictures of this when we make this
Mm.
into a transcript, and we can insert them. But the Rutt Etra had a very small screen, but one of the unique factors of it was it had a much faster display rate than screens at the time. So it was, I mean, Anton can mention because he's going to.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that was interesting is the screen module on the Rutt Etra. I think there were different versions of it, and the one that I happened to see featured a military grade radar scope. And so it was higher resolution in terms of line count than, or like the aperture grill, was higher resolution than HD. And it had a higher refresh rate. So they had a really fine line. And then because of what was happening about this Sarah, this conversation about, like, I know you know this, but just for the audience, the deconstructing of the medium of changing the signal, that beam would just go wherever you wanted, and it would move at a rate much faster than what a video refresh sort of would be. And so it had this really beautiful visceral feeling, and I just got kind of hooked on it. But I really like the flexibility of the digital systems where you weren't constrained by the hardware. The whole system could be adapted. So we worked really hard on trying to understand spiritually what the Rutt was doing, how to do some of the quirky things that it did in terms of dampening signals, and that sort of the softness that an analog system can have, and how can you emulate that in a digital system. And then what are the things that you can truly do and not have to emulate, where the Rutt sort of had this Z space. It looked like it was doing stuff in Z, but it was really just on the raster on two dimensions. But if we're doing it in 3D, we can actually do it in 3D. And now you can have projections and all these other fun things. And because Bill is incredibly sophisticated and really knows the analog, the software, the digital, and he sees where things are going, he was really excited about kind of embracing the Rutt. Color was one obvious thing that you could do that the Rutt didn't do. Is that helpful? Is that I don't
Yeah,
know
no,
if I'm
that,
rambling. I think we should have this be a conversation. So
well,
Sarah, if
no,
you have things you want to jump in, like, please. I don't want to um uh
I'll say
monologue. Yeah.
we are looking for a bit of conversation, but also that kind of like letting somebody talk for 5 or 10 minutes so we could get the history of this thing,
Mm,
because these
mm.
things aren't really documented in a lot of places.
Well, I mean, maybe it's
Um,
helpful because we dove in just with the assumption folks know what the hell the Red Etra
well,
is,
I mean,
right?
so the way that I didn't really get into it at the beginning, but the way that we want to write this up is we're going to take we're going to post these whole interviews with no editing or as little editing as possible. But along with this, we're going to make the, kind of interesting parts into a transcript that are more of a traditional interview where we can insert some videos and images. So I was going to say, even before Sarah, when you were talking about having that picture of people staring at that wall of static that you had made, please send that to us. So when we do the full write up, when we do the edited version of this, we can insert some of that media in here. But I'll also just say one of my favorite sort of like little pop-up things that aren't video related are when have you ever gone to one of those events where people just get up and talk for 5 or 10 minutes and they get to talk for
Pecha
5 or 10 minutes.
kucha.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. I love that, where you could have somebody talk for 5 or 10 minutes. And there are times where a conversation is great, but there are also times where I want to hear somebody talk about something that's in their brain for 5 or 10 minutes uninterrupted. I didn't want to stop you to say that that bar was called Remote Lounge, even after I looked it up, because you were on a roll there.
Remote lounge, of
Remote
course.
Lounge, yeah. But yeah, no, that was exactly what I was going for there. So thank you very much. But we will kick it over to Sarah now to talk about just your general experience of working with analog hardware. You've got a Fairlight, you've got a bunch of LZX hardware, but you also do a ton of stuff digitally. And one of the things I love about your setups in particular is the way that you merge analog and digital stuff kind of, you know, very seamlessly in your setup. And the guest tutorial that you did with us, where you really laid out these are the hardware boxes that I use for going back and forth between my computer and the LZX hardware. So if you could just talk a little bit about the difference between when you're working digitally versus you're working analog and the process of merging them a little bit. And anything else you want to talk about
Yeah.
analog and digital world?
Yeah, I kind of have like a hoarding problem. And then every time I make a system that works, and I'll go back to talking about them in a second, I like add another step. And then I'm like, oh my God, this next step's fucking amazing. Like, I guess now I need to start traveling with like 80 different converters. I have friends who make fun of me now when I travel because like, why do you have so many bags? I'm like, it's just video gear. And so I take trains everywhere. That's the nice part about living in Europe is I don't have to figure out how to fly with my videos since I'm just patient enough to take them on the train and then I will eventually get where I'm going with them. But yeah, so to go back maybe one step, I first off started doing digital art because I did live coding. So I wrote a framework to write SVGs live, and then I would go with Live Code NYC people and play in bars in New York, and it was really fun. And I was like, all right, this is cool. And then I did a residency in 2019 at Alfred University, where they have a really old Jones frame buffer and a Fairlight CVI, both of which I fell in love with immediately. I hadn't really thought about frame buffers and repeating things and that sort of stuff. And I was just like, wait, this is exactly what I want. I don't know why this is exactly what I want, but there's something about using, I think, the geometric shapes and then being able to layer them that I find really compelling. And then I learned later actually that the Fairlight CVI is pretty much the first mixed analog digital instrument. So much of its effects and a lot of what people see as very classic CVI effects, which I always tell people is like 80s MTV video effects. If you're like, weird things they did in 80s on MTV, it's probably a Fairlight CVI. And that's because it was one of the first that combined the digital buffer in the background with the analog signals still over the digital work. And even more, you can write from the analog to the digital signal. So I'll give you some video clips of this as well. But I find that really compelling for reasons I'm not entirely certain about. I think I like the contrast between the softness of the analog and the hardness of the digital, especially because on the CVI, everything's still just like 720p. So it's not very big. And then you can zoom in and out on the backgrounds. And so I find you can make these really like painterly effects, but digitally painterly, but not digitally painterly and like the creepy, too smooth, like AI, but even pre-AI, that sort of like generated 3D work, which I just find smooth and creepy and it makes my skin crawl. And in this way, you have this sort of interesting, very characteristically digital work, but it's got that like crunchy, pixelated effect. And so I fell in love with the CVI. And then I was like, I'm never going to get to have one because they're old and they're expensive. And my husband was like, but you love this, and found some guy who refurbishes them. And so you went on his list. And if he had a refurbished one, he'd email the list and the first person got it. And we were in Berlin. So I think we just saw the email before everyone else because we were here. So we emailed him. We're like, we'll take it. Yes, I want it, but don't ship it to me. And it turns out my mom lives like 5 blocks from this guy because I grew up outside LA. I grew up in the suburbs of LA. So there's tons of old video stuff there,
Yeah.
especially right when like all of the stations were going digital. And so this CVI was part of he had a editing suite that kids used for like their prom videos and stuff. Like you could go to his shop and put effects in your prom videos, and he lived around the corner from my parents, so they got that for me. And now it's in New York, and I'm working on bringing it to Berlin. Um, and so, yeah, I think I just really fell in love with the ability to layer stuff, but you can't take the Fairlight everywhere. And so I found LZX because they have a module called the Memory Palace, which is also their frame buffer module. So it does, geometric transformations, some color transformations, but the majority of what it's doing is the frame buffer work and the feedback system that they put in there. So then I started using that system because I didn't have the CVI in Berlin and because I could take it places. And now my rack also includes some glitch modules, particularly from Syntonie, as well as some mixers. I use some sound analog modules as well, some sound Eurorack modules. Some start crossing into video frequencies, so you can use it mostly just for stripes and shapes. LZX also has a module that generates gradients, which I have found really helpful if I want to be doing feedback work. And now my system, I can take the latest system I've been performing with takes in computer generated stuff into the Eurorack. And then also I can use internally generated things. I use some glitch modules. I send it back into VDMX, and then use different effects, especially like motion masks and things like that. I can use Siphon to send it to the signal culture apps too. So I can start, live changing the signal like 10 times. And then lately, because I started doing full feedback, so sending that back into the synth again, I discovered one of the most terrifying screens in VDMX, which is the advanced full screen projection screen, so that I can now sit there and enter all the different sizes because I need to send the signal out multiple times so I don't just get a big loop.
Oh, that's
But
awesome.
yeah.
How do you arrive at your signal path? Like when you are iterating on, like from what I'm hearing about how you work, Sarah, you arrive at some sort of configuration and then maybe you stick with that and you learn that configuration of your various modules, software, hardware together, how they work. But when you're sort of not in performance mode and maybe when you're in sort of in the lab, for lack of a better word, and you're kind of trying to find some new things, what is your process of thinking about or just exploring all of the multitude, like the combinatoric explosion of different ways that you can patch these systems together?
I would say I rely on luck a lot, which I sometimes hate to admit to people. It's like, because
Hmm.
sometimes you wonder, you're like, am I really in charge of this if I've just found it? But I tend to find that I make something I really like, and then when trying to recreate it, even though I was there and I do understand how the modules work, you like go to recreate it, and there was either something that was path dependent or image dependent. Um, oh yeah,
Awesome.
that's the system that's not the feedback loop. Now it gets even worse. Now we're sending this projected image all the way back. Um,
Awesome.
but yeah, so I find that by trying to recreate something that I really liked, I almost never get back there, but I get to something else that I really like. And I think it's the process of trying to control it better that helps me realize what I'm missing. And then I say, oh, I like that. I'm going to write it down. I'm going to test it out. I also think I told David this once, but when I first started using VDMX, he gave it to me because I needed something that could do Siphon. And he was like, oh, VDMX can do this for you when I was using the signal culture apps. And I was going through the effects and I was like, I want to understand all of these. So I literally sat there with like three different video images that I had that were kind of different, dark background, light background, and just ran the effects on them and
Yeah,
wrote it all
yeah.
down in a big notebook and was like, okay, like how do I really understand this? And then from there I kind of go with a vibe. But also I like have this dream project that I'm still trying to convince somebody to let me do, which is that I really want to do a durational installation and do like an 8 hour or a 12-hour piece that is that
Mm,
full exploration, because I think it can be really interesting. And it's a little difficult when you perform because you have 30 minutes to get people somewhere
yeah. Yeah.
and they're not in the vibe of I'm going to stand here. But if you're like, hey, here's a big like white box gallery, um,
Along those lines, actually, and I will encourage you to do this if you can find a space for it. I have a friend from my college days, Seth Cluett, and he used to do these overnight performances in the deep listening space in Kingston, where, I mean, he was doing, sine tones in a room as the performance, and you would walk around, but they were overnight performances. So basically, when you felt tired, you would just pull out your sleeping bag and sleep in the gallery space, and then we slept listening to the sine tones and got up in the morning and all, talked about our different dreams and things like that. And I feel like that's the kind of that sort of a thing could really even work well with visuals because even when you're asleep, the lighting and the space around you can have some sort of an influence.
yeah, for
Um,
sure. There's this gallery down this hill from us that's in the caretaker's house in a cemetery in Berlin. So fewer people in Berlin are getting buried in cemeteries in Berlin, and so the caretakers' houses are turning into other things. There was just a story recently about how a lot of them have turned into cafes. This is a gallery. It still has the old coal stoves that Berlin used to have. So they're like these giant ceramic stoves, and if you bank one up, it works for about 8 hours. So I've been thinking it would be really fun. I'm still working on convincing them that like deep in the heart of winter when it's dark really early here, so you could do it whenever you want, basically do like an 8 hour stove piece and be like, we start when the stove is banked up and we end when it's too cold to stay.
Awesome.
But I think
uh,
like teaching
oh,
people
I
how to
think,
look at video would be cool.
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I really I liked what you said. Sorry,
No, go.
David. I liked what you said about sort of enumerating, like you sort of have a set of video content that you're familiar with, so you know how it responds to the effects and things that you know, and these become in some sense like your reference images, right? And then when you're learning a new system, you take those and you go, okay, I know how you work, so let me learn this new thing and try it with this new effect and wrap my head around how it what it does, how it plays, what it works with, and you can find it there. But I've never it never even occurred to me to have a notebook. So I would love to see your notebook of how what your notes are on the notebook about how you've written down what effects you like, or just that's just a great idea that never occurred to me as like a way to sort of document your findings.
I
Is
don't
it
think I ever
like
sent them to David. I like gave them
oh
weird names and like reorganized them. So I was like, these effects should really be a group because this is the like weird crunchy group. This is the like
oh
smooth
Wait, the
Ah,
ghosty group.
taxonomy, like what's your taxonomy for like how you organize these things, right? Like, yeah, because it's we have this traditional sort of like it's a displacement or it's a warp or it's a color effect, but I like it. It's ghosty. It's sort of like is it maybe vibe based taxonomy for how it feels, right? What's like the resonance for it? That's
uh,
great.
Along those lines, one of the things we were actually talking about for ISF version 3 as a specification is this idea that you could have, categories, which are, this is a blur, this is a, it's a displacement effect, but then you can also have tags that are like crunchy and things that are, maybe and have those be searchable as well, or browse by tags, browse by categories, because you do kind of want to have two taxonomies sometimes for, these different levels of things. And yeah, people who study library sciences always blows me away. Uh, yeah, anyway, that's again a whole other deep conversation I feel like we could all get into is just talking about taxonomy of effects and other things. Future conversation because now, since Sarah had brought up the idea of Siphon as something that she uses, and of course we have Anton, who is the co-creator of Siphon, actually came up with the original idea that became Siphon. I would love to talk, and along with that, both of you are people who have created your own tools that, there's a reason why Siphon is such a useful thing is that, Sarah had mentioned she made her own tool for making SVGs as a process. Anton, you are currently working on your own, to what extent you're going to publish it, but you've been working on a node-based, uh, uh, I don't even know what to call it, language or toolkit for yourself to develop things. So starting with Sarah this time, Can you talk a little bit about creating your own tools for live coding, other kind of more niche tools that you've used for live coding that maybe you didn't write, but are kind of made by the community and get published, and they are siphoned in and out, and kind of what the process is for that for people who don't really, maybe who might think that making their own little utility that just publishes out to siphon might not be approachable for them, but it is really something that people can do, and it's very powerful. And then we can go to Anton, who could maybe talk a little bit about the history of how Siphon came about, how you and Tom came to work on that together. It would be great to hear, the history of that as well. But
Yeah, so I don't actually know how Siphon works. I don't publish to Siphon. I use VDMX's window input to ingest my work, to ingest stuff from my toolkit, and then all of the signal culture apps use Siphon. So I mostly use the Siphon end for publishing and getting signal back from those apps. But in terms of building your own thing, I think I just think about things in a I don't like thinking about things the way other people want me to think about things necessarily. So, for instance, one of the most popular live code visual frameworks probably is Hydra by Olivia Jack, which is an amazing framework. Like the work is good, and even more, the work that she put into having a community so that everybody can use that tool, I think is incredibly amazing. So I built La Habra, which is my little like closure script SVG framework that I built because I had those skills from doing work and data viz and other art, and I wanted to live code, and I was like, well, I know how to write SVGs. They look the way I want to look. I can use ClojureScript to write them in this sort of declarative reactive way, so I'm not, having to deal with thinking about loops like you do in processing in P5 and stuff, that I can just say it's this thing. And so I wrote it that way because I really wanted to, but I also do like no community work. Like it is online, and it's basically like, if you want to use this, you can use this. I make no promises it will work. I make no promises I won't break it. Like if you like it and you want to use it, feel free, but like it's kind of up to you. And so I've only had one other person use it. So but it was very interesting because I was a little concerned about, if you make your own tool, how much of its aesthetic characteristic comes from the tool versus how you use the tool is your work. So somebody else performed with it here in Berlin, and she invited me, and I was terrified that it was going to look exactly like my work, and I was going to be like, oh my God, my work is just a tool. It's not what I'm doing with it. And that was not the case, luckily. Otherwise, maybe I wouldn't tell this story and I would just be very sad about it. But so I like seeing what other people can do with your tools, but I like to make mine because I like to be picky and do it in just the way I want to do it. And I can take inspiration from other people, which is great. Like I love how open it is, but yeah, that's sort of my approach.
I really love what you just said, because I have had exactly the same internal dialogue on, if I share this, am I giving away that secret sauce, or is it a thing that I have learned to master, and because of how I play the instrument, that's really the thing that kind of matters, right? And I had a whole bunch of conversations about this back in the day with folks actually at Share, folks who run the gamut of not even discussing what they're doing in their signal processing pipeline. Like, I'm not even going to give you a hint at what I'm doing, to folks that are like, here's the entire, max patch, or let me walk you through every step of it. So I think there's many different kind of approaches to that. But what I've always enjoyed, and I'm curious, Sarah, if you, in the performance that you saw with your own software, have you ever stumbled on someone performing and then realizing or finding out that they used your tool? Because that happened to me once. One time I was at a show and I said, this is really fantastic. I wonder what they're doing. And I went up afterwards. I said, hey, that was great. I really love this. You had wonderful texture. How the hell were you doing that? Using your plugin, you asshole. I said, how did you do? I've never seen anyone do that before with it. I've never stumbled on that. So like, that to me is the most fulfilling. But also, it reinforces the idea that you're not the tool, right? Or like the tool itself is just one mode of your creativity, and there's this whole other mode of mastering the instrument. So you can build the instrument, you can master the instrument or explore the space of the instrument. Anyway, I really liked what you said.
Which I
I'll
think
also
makes
just
sense. Oh,
I
sorry.
was gonna say, I was just gonna
I
say
was just gonna say, yeah.
I remember Anton specifically being asked the same question at a panel conversation, probably in 2013. There was a thing, and I remember you were up on stage. I think maybe Luc Dubois was the panel
Mhm.
host or moderator. But anyway, let's kick it to Sarah.
I was gonna say, well, it's funny that we worry about it so much because like what infinite number of garage rock bands exist that are writing three chord songs, all of
Yeah,
which are different, and I can tell the
yeah,
difference between them when I hear them, right? And that's like
yeah.
the same instrument and the same approach and so many similar things, but maybe because we are more on the edge of stuff that people are used to, we're worried that it's the tool, but I wonder if
And
it
I
ever
also
is the
think,
tool.
yeah, no, you're totally right about that. I do think though that I wonder if I'm curious what musicians who build their own instruments think about this, because that to me is like the closest analog, right? Because I think it's one thing to use a tool that is sort of has gotten to a place, or I would say use an instrument that has gotten to a place where it's so ubiquitous. Where you go, that's a piano, that's a drum, that's a guitar, right? And I don't know that video in any real way has that, right? Where the common folk go, oh, you're a musician, you play the piano. I know what that means, right? And so I'm curious for folks that build their own instruments, if part of it is like the the knowledge of making the tool gets entwined somehow with the knowledge of using the tool, right? And that's such a different mode of even thinking and exploring. I don't know. I don't know if I've said anything useful there, but it's
Well,
just
you
an
know what it
interesting.
makes me wonder? It makes me wonder if it's harder to break a tool that you made, right? Because sometimes like the fun approach is to break something, but
That's
I
a
don't know that I'm
yeah,
good
yeah.
at breaking things I made.
No,
Or not even breaking, it's just
absolutely.
finding the things that are off of the beaten path from where you go. You know,
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I didn't have a thought. It's just I very often think just in terms of not even just within our own artistic bubbles, but that a lot of technology and a lot of science is driven by this overlap of the arts and the sciences. And there's this interesting part in the middle where there are these new questions that get asked that are off the beaten path for both sides. And that certainly exists within making your own tools. And I often think that like people who, make guitars, and then you have Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah, 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 exactly. Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, I think the thing is that when you're building a tool, you generally speaking, and I'm curious, Sarah, your thoughts on this, but I typically have like a destination in mind when I start, and I might not arrive there. I might get detoured, but I've started with kind of maybe a set of assumptions. And I think for folks that enjoy breaking tools or finding the boundary of tools is identifying those assumptions and throwing them out the window and going, I'm going to use, you mentioned using an audio signal generator that happens to work in video frequencies. So you can use that as right. Um, so yeah, so I think that there's like a perspective when you're building a tool that is very different than the perspective of when you're exploring a tool or trying to find creative, expressive opportunities. And it reminds me just of something as rote and boring as like product testing and user testing, right? Like you build a product and you assume that a user is going to think about the problem in the same way, that they're going to think about your solution in the same way, and they're going to even click the buttons in the order that you put them in, right? And then you give to someone and you're like, oh my God, what the fuck are you doing? This doesn't work. This is scary, right? But that's kind of the fun part when it's an instrument.
Yeah, I think so. I think I usually have a place that I'm aiming for, and I just make mistakes along the way, and then I decide that the mistakes are what I wanted to be doing, which I think which for me is kind of an important stance in the face of like a lot of computer work that's so focused on not letting people make mistakes, whether it's type systems or other things, that it's trying to keep you on
Mm,
this really safe path. And in some ways, it feels very silly to be like, my practice is making mistakes, but my practice is making mistakes because making mistakes is important and making them cool is important. And so making things, I think, when I think about user inputs and interfaces and stuff, I think about how do I put a place in where I'm guessing what you want so you don't have to over specify, even at the risk of it all going wrong. Like, how can I
Mm,
guess it? Maybe it's not what you wanted, and then you can specify it, but instead of forcing that specification up front, I think that's something that leaves a lot of space for people to do things how they want. For people who are less confident in what they're doing to do things how they want. Like, I'm very confident writing code now. I wasn't when I started making art, and I've given a lot of workshops with people who aren't, and they love that. Like in JavaScript, if you give it too many arguments, it doesn't yell at you, it just keeps going.
that's
And so giving
really
people that space, sorry.
no, I think that's really interesting that like it hadn't really occurred to me to even conceptualize the language choice of an untyped sort of maybe unsafe language, for lack of a better term, with this idea of like the over specification of the input as a way of like limiting your space to explore, right? Or like just make a mistake, like the system can trudge on, right? And like I think analog equipment is really good at that. Digital equipment is, I think, less rigid, or is more rigid rather, sort of by design. But I hadn't considered the even just the language choice as being a part of the sort of philosophy behind the intent of the tool. That's cool.
And now there's a whole module with the analog digital problem, right? As you know, glitch modules, a lot of them are now limited to CRTs because a digital machine will just blue screen because it's like, I don't
Yep.
understand that. But now, Syntonie, who I mentioned before, one of his modules is called stable, and it exists to restabilize that signal so that you can use your glitch modules
Is that like
on a
like
digital program.
a new breed of time-based corrector?
I think so. It takes the signal. It takes when you send your input in, it breaks the signal up and saves the sync. And then when you
Right.
output it,
I
it
see.
re-encodes it with the sync
Yeah.
that you sent in so that you can send it through your glitch chain
Yeah.
and then return it.
That makes sense. That's cool. Yeah, that stuff is always frustrating when you get this like really to this really great place and you go somewhere and your TV accepts it or your input device accepts it and then you're like, what the fuck? I guess I got nothing today. Yeah.
Sure.
David, I think we need like 10 more of these. I know you like have a theory that you're going to do this with other people, but I think you actually just need to keep talking to me and Anton for like 10 more
Yeah, I think that's
episodes.
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
so. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, no, I think it'll be great because not only this, we'll also be able to have, I think, repeat. I would like to have repeat guests interviews because yeah, there's so much to talk about, and I feel like we're gonna have to wrap up soon because it's almost noon already. Um,
Well, I want to hear about the tools that you're building, Sarah. What is there a specific thing that you're currently working on or trying to manifest?
Well, so I would say like 70% of my practice is trying to manifest this durational performance that I'm weirdly obsessed with and practicing that stuff. But I also recently built this like online SVG sequencer. So it's just 9 slots, um, and nine slots for 9 elements of the circle, basically. Somebody asked me why nine, and I said because I didn't want to deal with JavaScript numbers, because like when they're represented as strings and you have to convert back and forth to make them order correctly. And I'm like, it's nine because nine is easy. Um, and so you can use SVGs that I put in, and just sequence them. Or I also wrote it so that you can put SVGs in and sort of write your own CSS animations, like in a little form on the front of it.
Mm.
It's sort of shorthand. Um, and so I've been messing around with performing with that a little bit. I would not say
It's
I've mastered it.
it's interesting to me that you like the aesthetics. I'm not trying to be contentious, but I like the you like the SVG, which is this like vector resolution independent representation of graphics, and then you're working with analog video, which is has a limited gamut, limited resolution. How do you join those two different ways of thinking about working with rasters and imagery?
I like flatness. So I think for me, it's
Mm,
just that it's the flatness of it, that nothing is trying to be this three-dimensional representation. And then I get layers by using the different layers and sending things through
right.
different effects. And then you've created this sort of like layered system that isn't in a Z index, or the Z index is time and previous chunks of it. Um, I actually don't have true three-dimensional perception. One of my eyes is messed up and it always has been. And so it's funny because
Oh,
I have friends that
wow.
I tell this and they're like, oh, that's why everything you make is flat. And I was like, I don't know if that's true, but I do like flat things.
Oh, that yeah. I mean, that's funny because you mentioned earlier you don't like that there was like that era of CG where it was very polygonal, shiny surfaces that had this sort of crude dimensionality to it. And I think you said it was icky, or what did you say? You was bro. You said, but
Yeah,
that's
it's gross,
interesting
especially when
that
it's
you right,
smooth, when it gets like, yeah, that
right,
weird
right, right,
smoothness.
right. That's interesting.
Um, yeah, I don't have 3D perception and I have really bad astigmatism. So I have tested this on people. There's things that look three-dimensional to me. Like if you put like a bright pink on like a deep blue and I look on a
Mm,
screen, to me that looks like there's an implied three dimension. And I've tested it on
yeah.
people, and everyone with astigmatism is like, oh yeah, that looks like really 3D. And people without it are like, what are you talking about? So
Oh, that's interesting. I have an astigmatism. It's mild, but I very much respond to color field depth, where blue tends to recede in the background and warmer colors tend to move up front. And I just stumbled, like I really like the world of like optical illusions as kind of like a glitch for your visual system, where you kind of get to learn a little bit about all the dumb shit your brain does that you don't kind of you're not aware of, right? It's a way of the materiality, right, of your own visual processing and assumptions come to light. And someone made this really great, I guess it would be an optical illusion that's just two colors kind of rotating, and it feels so 3D to me. And other people responded like, "I don't get it. It's just some circles moving. Like, what are you? What is this?" So maybe it's the astigmatism or something like that that affects. That's interesting. I never would have considered that being like a part of the pathway of me responding to something in that way. Hmm.
yeah, but I think it might be because it's the same with like when I found out that people without astigmatism don't see all the edges on the lights, like apparently I do you not have
Yeah.
astigmatism, David? You're looking at me like I'm a loon. But like if you have astigmatism and you look at a light, it like you should look it up on Google because you just say
Yeah.
like lights astigmatism. But I didn't know other people didn't see those for a very long time.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm looking right now. I see the flares, the sort of like anamorphic that I definitely get. But what is the edges? The
I think that's what I mean is like the
oh
anamorphic flare. Like
oh
to
you get
me, that's
the
like a
sweeps.
displaced
Yeah,
edge. Yeah, that like
I
when it
see.
like
I see. Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
know what I
yeah.
would really like to say is I really like how you can run your computer through like a filter that shows you like this is what this would look for different levels of color blindness. Is there an equivalent where it's like put everything through this filter? It might need to be an analog filter at some, I put a big lens up in front of something, but is there something that mimics astigmatism in this kind of a way so people who don't have it can understand it and get that it's,
Give
like you're
me
saying, a glitch for your eyes. And like, there's some people who have it
oh,
naturally, and the rest of us, we need an aesthetic, we need a GLSL filter that does our edge detection.
I just went on. I have to find it in my messages. I'm obsessed actually with cinema, and so I love representational imagery, which I think is an interesting conversation, Sarah. That like, so my art, I tend to not mind people in it and whatnot, and I just sort of obsess about lenses and the feeling of a how you can get a beautiful representational imagery and how you can emulate that in graphics. And I was doing research, and I found this research paper these images, and I don't know if you can see, but it's a lens with an eyelash taped to it, and they're doing studies on the different glare, which they said, oh look, we've eyelash rotated 90 degrees. So great. Anyway, these are the things that I find very funny. But yes, clearly someone's doing this research on how to emulate these kinds of a thing, which is fantastic and perfect. I'll send you those images so you can put them up on the blog.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, no, but it actually gets back to, and this is something I always show when I'm teaching, an introduction to like what live visuals are, is I can't remember the name of it right now. I have to look it up, but there's one of these older hardware systems, and there's a video up on YouTube where they're explaining how it works, and they're talking about how they would take a camera and the screen, and they would put like some gauze in between, and then rescan it, and that's how they did an effect. Or they would do, some mylar in an interesting way and shine a light, and that's how they got this like metallic looking effect on some company's logo.
I watched a video on practical VFX from the first Terminator movie. And the scene, the death scene where the Terminator gets crushed in the press was improvised. They did not plan that. And the behind the scenes shots, it's aluminum foil, a little red light, just an LED light. They shot at low exposure, and there's a guy smoking a cigarette right below the camera who just goes and blows the smoke up. And it just works and it's perfect and you don't need anything else. And so those sorts of like the practical physical sort of interceding in the system is also great. And that's actually one of the reasons I really like the analog stuff as opposed to the digital. Is there's from a performance and watching the performance perspective, there's an instrument that's being worked with. So I think there's something to that as well, just like as like practical VFX, live performance, instrument. There's this through line of like physically, you get to see a performance, whether it's hidden or not. There's something there, which is great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I also love practical effects and miss them in so many different things that it's just like one of my favorites is, the in Escape from New York, when they're looking at the computer wireframe of this town, generating that then actually was so hard. It's literally just a black model with like reflective tape on the edges that they
Amazing.
filmed, and that is the computer wireframe. And like, I'm like, that's so much better than you making it on the computer.
That's great. I did not know that. That's
Uh,
awesome.
I guess we'll just have to do a whole other episode on like practical effects and as a conversation.
Well, just so I haven't seen this in many years, but I was reminded Danielle and I for Halloween will watch like old cheesy movies, and I was looking up and I had this flashback. Apparently, there was a movie that was like a murder caper film about VFX artists, and in
Uh, I,
it's called VFX or like FX or
I
something like
saw
that.
that movie when I was growing up. I
Yeah,
loved it, and there's a sequel
yeah.
to it also.
There's a sequel to it.
I'm pretty sure there's a sequel to it.
Okay,
Yeah.
that
You know,
maybe this is going to actually turn into like a book club, but where we would just watch.
we actually, if we wanted to do a watch along party live stream for those two movies, and maybe we like try and raise some money for a charity sometime or something, that would be a
We could
fun
do
thing to
like the
do.
Mystery Science Theater 3000, just a running monologue over the.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm in.
Yeah, I mean, we just
Yeah,
tell
that's
people like,
awesome.
we're hitting play right now, load it up on whatever streaming service has it, and yeah, we go. That would be good. Okay, so we do kind of have to wrap a little bit, but I have one bonus round question, and then we'll wrap. What is your favorite music video?
I can tell you what I think the most impactful one was.
Yeah, I know any sort of relevant music video that you want to talk about is for a minute or two is great.
I have a visceral memory of being up at 3 in the morning watching MTV Amp and Odeker's Second Bad Bible music video coming on and just going, what the fuck am I watching? This is incredible. And I don't know if it's my favorite music video in like historically, but I think it's the one that cemented my interest in syncopation of sound and picture.
Yeah, part of me wants to be like any Norman McLaren film in the sense that, like, for me, I find the abstraction really compelling. But like straight up MTV, I was obsessed with the Dire Straits Money for Nothing video when I was a little kid, that like Max Headroom one when I was like 4 or 5. I was obsessed 100%. And then the Sledgehammer video also, like all the stop motion weird animation as a kid. I think even then I knew what I wanted to like be working on, and anytime they came on I would stop immediately and watch them.
Perfect. All right. We'll have to put those as embeds here now. If and get taken down for copyright.
What
It's
about you, David?
educational.
Oh, favorite music videos. I always really liked the we had when I was in college, we had the Spike Jones collection on DVD, and we watched all of those. They were all just so inspirational. I think the my friend Olivia, when we had a whole night where we just cut up into shots all of the Spike Jones and then did remix those live. So that whole all of that was just mind blowing for me. And the Michel Gondry ones, we had that box set also. They were just all of that stuff blew me away back then. That was just when I was getting into live visuals. Yeah. So major inspiration there. And Cornelius, what's yours?
Michel Gondry, like I think it's Chemical Brothers. Like Let It Be, because it's so much of that using the camera tricks, and then you watch it and you're like, to make this happen, it's so incredible.
Yeah.
So,
I guess I'll mention like Aphex Twin, Come to Daddy, always like that when that comes on, I'm like, okay. Yeah, again, it's like what Anton was saying. It's like this just like messes with my brain on a certain level that I don't necessarily go to that place myself, but seeing other people do it just is like, oh my God, that's a thing. Thank you two very much. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Anton, for joining us. And yeah, we'll definitely have you guys back because this was a lot of fun. And we have, it seems like a bunch of other topics to talk about. So yeah, have a great day. Enjoy your Wednesday and go get some food or whatever.
Thanks, everyone.
Peace
Hey, that was
out.
a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Cheers.